Tuesday, July 23rd, obviously 2024. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Presentation, discussion, possible relocation of police department to 2504 South Central Avenue, introduced by Jody Gurink, Police Chief. Presentation by Michael Mace, Senior Architect, ADCI.
Okay, first of all, thank you all for showing up tonight. I really appreciate it. You probably recall a few weeks back, or a number of weeks back now, that it was decided that we have Mike come back and give the presentation again that he got from the feasibility study with the Wildwood building. It's been a while. I think it was last October that he had that presentation. So there's been a lot that's happened since then. So it's probably good just to have a refresher so we all know all the details. So without any further ado, we'll have Mike step up and give the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm getting some technical assistance here to get the presentation to go full screen, and once we have that, we can start into it. But I'll thank you, Chief Jody, for introducing me. As Chief said, my name is Mike Moss. I'm with Architectural Design Consultants Incorporated. Easier version of stating that is ADCI out of Lake Delton. So last year, the city of Marshfield reached out to us and we did a site and building assessment for this project. That took place early on in 2023 and kind of mid-year. And then we did the presentation in October of 23, as Chief said. This is not an updated presentation. It's still the same information. We're basically going back and revisiting it, touching base on topics, kind of bringing it to the forefront of discussion again in this meeting. So that's the purpose of why we're meeting here. I think we're ready to go, it looks like. Thank you very much. Yep. So I may need to, it's looking slightly different on screen here than it is projected. If you could bear with me one moment, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be advancing slide or pages.
So you just click the down.
Okay. Excellent. Is there a way to get the sheet full size on the screen? Can we
For some reason,
scale that down?
It won't go with the full screen mode is gray out, so I can't.
Okay.
For some reason, just do that.
If I scale this back, no, that's not, there we go. There we can see the full sheet. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, I believe everyone did receive a copy of the report, and that's what we're going to be going through here. Certainly not, rehashing the information, reading it off the report, line item by line item, but I want to touch base on the highlights of it, basically, again, as a refresher going into this conversation. I'll try to keep this to about 30 to 35 minutes with the purpose then of, having an opportunity for any questions, conversation, or any where you would want to take it at that point. So about a half an hour here is what we'll do. So along with us with ADCI, we had Henneman Engineering, our consultant on the project, who also assisted in looking at mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all of those components on the building. And table of contents, as far as our report is concerned, we broke it down into 7 different sections, obviously ending up with a summary. But I'll touch base on each of these as we go through the next half hour, kind of hitting the highlights again of those individual items. Excuse me. So as the city reached out to us, we wanted to get an understanding of the existing conditions of the police department right now in the current facility. And that's where we started out our site visit last year, back in June, I believe it was taking a walk through the existing facility, getting an assessment of that, talking things through there, and then taking a look at the Wildwood Plaza facility, We ended up having 3 different visits to that facility as we assembled our report. And that's where this information is based off of then, is those conversations and discussions. So reviewing the existing facility and space needs based off of the current facility, the police department building right now that they're in was built in 1981, so that's now 42 or 43 years old, in that range. It's about 18,000 square feet. When we walked that building last year, the thing that struck me the most, I guess, is that throughout the entire building, everywhere that we walked through, I could see that functions were happening within that building, kind of stacked on top of each other, if you will, in multiple locations. Not every location, but in multiple locations, additional storage, a makeshift meeting space, things where there isn't storage space and therefore it's stored in a mechanical room or in a hallway or those types of things. And while that obviously can be a solution for a period of time, it's not a long-term solution to functioning that way. And it seemed like, in general, just an assessment looking at it was that there was a shortage of space within that building. Again, knowing that the building was constructed over 4 decades ago, things have certainly changed in that time as far as the police department functions are concerned. And that brings to light, the question of what square footage is necessary for an efficient and proper layout for a building based off of today in 2024. And then looking further on to the future, when we design a facility like this, the target is 40 years, sometimes 30 years, but 40 years is really kind of where you're targeting. This building being 42, 43 years old is at that point in time where the target has been met or maybe possibly even exceeded. Buildings do get pushed beyond their intended life expectancy all the time. That definitely happens, especially in municipalities. So it's not uncommon, but definitely a situation to be aware of. 2 other things that struck me in walking through that building, which wouldn't have been, certainly not as large of topics of discussion when it had been designed and constructed 40 years ago, would be one, security. So there was different situations. Of course, our world was different 40 years ago than it is today. But for instance, now when we design a police department facility, when you walk into the lobby, we want that to be secure in that if there's a threat entering the building, that staff is protected from that. Ballistic rated walls, ballistic rated glazing, doors, those are all commonplace on the front side or public side of a facility that we would design today. That carries on, throughout the building and other locations as well. Just basis of design throughout is always in the back of our minds, trying to think about security and safety of staff as we're designing a building. So though that particular topic on the existing building is one item that has changed over the course of time as far as design is concerned. The other thing would certainly be ADA accessibility. So 40 years ago, laws weren't even in effect that are in place today. It was really in the 90s and early 2000s that the ADA Act came into place. And because of that, the current building, as it was designed 40 years ago, the space requirements for certain components with the building were much less than they are today. So for instance, a single-use restroom 40 years ago didn't need to be designed for a 5-foot wheelchair turning radius. Grab bars weren't a part of that restroom. You didn't need clear space at the lavatory and at the sink. So all of those different items over the course of time have made a restroom, as we design it per building code today, larger in footprint than it would have been 40 years ago. So a single-use restroom in this building, I don't have exact measurements, but for instance, if it is 5 foot by 6 foot, today that same restroom needs to be closer to probably 8 foot by 9 foot to fit all of the individual components in it. It should be noted, actually, that Wisconsin is looking at adopting the next version of the International Building Code. They talk about it from time to time. It doesn't happen quickly when they are discussing it, but at some point it will happen. We're currently designing to the 2015 International Building Code. They're looking at adopting the 2021 International Building Code. In that code, that 5-foot turning radius for a wheelchair is actually being increased to a 5-foot 8-inch turning radius. So even today, and again, that's the 2021 code, the 2024 version is now also available. The International Building Code, or the International Code Council, ICC, they continue to increase space requirements for individual components. So that's another item I want to mention in the building, is that simply remodeling to make it ADA accessible becomes very, very difficult when you have to take spaces to make them larger, which means you're decreasing available space in adjacent rooms and places next to it. Stairwell widths are another one, corridor widths are another one. So for egress, when we talk about making an existing building to today's code, there's give and take throughout, and because of that, all of those space requirements, you actually end up with less usable space in other functions. So again, the summary there on the existing building is that we saw kind of the growth that had happened over time and the use of it right now. And it looks quite apparent that there is a space needs issue there with the current use of the building. There was a study done for the city of Marshfield in 2017 that was done by 5 Bugles Design, a different architectural firm from us. But that study still exists, obviously, and we also took a look at that information and what that means to today. And when I read that report, the thing I guess I'll say that struck me is that it was quite, I would say, similar to the same things that we discovered in 2023 when we were looking at this potential project and facility, what those needs might be. So from that 2017 space needs study, they had it broken down into these individual categories here. And what I did was I broke out the percentage of increase from current square footage to what that report was proposing for required square footage for a new facility. Again, that was in 2017. So you can see the percent of increase of these individual items off on the right here. Some of them definitely larger than others. Patrol and investigations were the two that had minimal increase identified. Other areas such as operational support and definitely fleet parking had substantial increase because those areas are lacking within the existing facility. All of those items from that 2017 report totaled up, came to 29,000 square feet, and then it was identified to add to that a 20% efficiency ratio. That would be for communication spaces, corridors, hallways, stairways, mechanical space, those types of things. So that report, all in, was recommending just over 35,000 square feet of building area for a new police department facility that would have been designed in 2017, 2018. The rest of this portion here touches on those individual components and kind of where that space would be additionally allocated towards. But the conclusion that I drew from it was that we're looking at today in 2024 a need for the same type of space. We're going to talk about that in a little bit here, but our calculations increased a few of these areas a little bit larger, and we were coming up with around 37,500 square feet of additional space required. I think a parallel can be drawn here that over the course of time, as years continue to pass, the city continues to grow, needs change, building codes change. That square footage will likely continue to go up over the course of time. We have the 2017 report and our assessment. We have projected for some additional growth within those numbers. But I would say it's safe to say at no point in time would a recommendation in total building square footage ever go backwards in size. I don't see things happening that would suggest a decrease in total square footage would be the correct direction to head for a new facility. So again, we're at 37,500 square foot as the target based off of our assessment. Evaluation of the site and the existing building. So from there, as I mentioned, we went and toured the Wildwood Plaza building and had multiple site visits there. The things that we spoke about in the prior discussions, we looked at how does that apply to this building. That building was constructed in 1996, so now 27 to 28 years old. It was set up as a multi-tenant building for retail use. So it's got three distinct divisions within the building. But the last use of that facility from Marshfield Clinic, they combined everything into one use. So obviously it's all under one roof. Now there's connection points between the three different rentals or retail spaces, if you will, that make it into one building. The building itself, again, being set up for Marshfield Clinic's use, it has some private rooms, individual offices, but it has a sea of workstations. That's what's in that building, really. I think it was a call center, if I remember correctly, in its last use. So if you think about converting a retail building or a multi-tenant building into the use for a police department, there's going to be a renovation project that would need to take place for that. A police department obviously has different needs. They function differently, different requirements actually, for what they would need to be working out of that building, thus the need for, I'll say, a relatively substantial renovation project if that building is to be considered to be converted for police department use. I think on the next page here, what we did was walk the facility, took a look at the condition of items within. And this grading system that we offered here was really a snapshot of the current condition of that building, not intended for police department use, but basically with a report card grading, how does it grade today? So asphalt and concrete, exterior site improvements, we graded it relatively low simply because that asphalt and much of the concrete has outlived its life expectancy. I actually drove over and looked at the building before coming here this afternoon, and it's really evident if you drive around that building, just the condition of the parking lot, the cracking, the grass growing up through the asphalt throughout the entire area, concrete sidewalks that have broken apart, rebar that's exposed and rusted. So it needs pretty substantial site improvements done to it. Site drainage, we gave it a B, so the site drainage wouldn't change with a renovation project. Water is getting to where it needs to go right now. There is some ponding that's happening on one side of the building towards, or the parking lot towards the park. And that should be corrected. But for the most part, drainage on that property is acting as it needs to. The next item regarding the building then is the category where I feel and we feel, ADCI, we feel that the most value is in that building, in that simply relates to the structure, the masonry and the steel framing. I will say in driving and looking at the building today that the masonry definitely needs maintenance done to it in locations. I can see some locations where paint is peeling, masonry joints are opening up, and that's just a routine part of maintenance on a building. You need to keep those things up in order to extend the life expectancy of that building. So nothing out of the ordinary, I wouldn't say, but things that are more visible to me on this visit than they were last summer when we did our visit. Could have something to do with the amount of rain that we've had as well. That's a possibility. But it was something that was definitely noticeable today. The masonry and the steel systems, that being said, kind of cosmetically, as long as that maintenance is kept up, they have much life expectancy left in them. And that, again, is where the value of that building comes into play. The structure itself, the shell and the structural system within has much life expectancy left in it. Insulation, we gave that an average grade of a C simply because it wasn't insulated as well in 1996 when it was built as compared to what it would be today with the energy code that is in place today. So increasing insulation would absolutely be a plus, and that would help to pay for itself over the course of time of use in that building. Interior finishes, currently, they're in average condition. We gave that a C, but again, much of that would be renovated if a project were to take place. Exterior opening, doors and windows, again, an average grade. They're in fair condition. They need some maintenance in some locations, not bad. Mechanical systems, that was a lower grade, simply because, again, the mechanical design requirements back then were different than they are today. And also the use for a police department facility would require most or if not all of the mechanical systems to be replaced anyway. That's not factored into this grading, but most of those rooftop units that are out there are at the end of their life expectancy. Usually 20 years, maybe 25 years is what you're going to get out of them, and they're nearing that point on many units. Some have been replaced already. Electrical is a C. The base system is there and in good condition. Plumbing, same situation. Fixtures are outdated, definitely. But if a project were to happen, I would say that yes, they would be replaced. Fire protection, that's the lowest grade simply because the building does not have an automatic sprinkler system in it. Was not required per code at the time. If it's going to be converted into a police department facility, it would require that a sprinkler system be added. And technology, the reason I gave it a low grade is simply because it looks like a spider web of things run through the building, and I don't see a lot of rhyme or reason behind it. So I'm sure it worked well, but it definitely is not what we would expect to see in a building today. We included some photos of the existing building for reference, and obviously I'd encourage anyone to go take a look at it. I'm sure if you'd like to see the inside of it, that could be set up as well if people haven't been able to get into it. The roof, I should mention specifically, the roof we're saying is nearing or at its end of life expectancy. One telltale sign of that is at the perimeter of the roof, the rubber membrane will start to shrink as that material gets old, and it's pulling away from the parapet walls in multiple locations, kind of stretching itself to a point. Eventually it can rip. There were some holes in it that were patched last summer when we were up there. So it definitely would need a new roof. And I would say no matter what happens with that building, that should be planned for. It will need a new roof in the near future. Some photos here of the concrete and asphalt conditions that we spoke about, or I spoke about earlier. And again, looking at existing conditions throughout many, many workstations as it's laid out right now. MEP evaluation, I'm not going to go into much detail here. I kind of touched on this with our report card grading system. In general, plumbing systems, storm piping, domestic water, they're all as you would expect them to be for a building of that age. Nothing has really been updated. Again, fire protection system or an automatic sprinkler system would need to be added to the building. That would most likely, or I should probably say most certainly, require a new water service to the building because the water service that's feeding the building right now would be insufficient to supply enough water for a automatic sprinkler system. Mechanical equipment we spoke about, most of those units are nearing the end of their life expectancy. Most of it right now is rooftop equipment. Ducting within, the majority of that, while it's served its purpose for the current use, that would be changed out with a project. Electrical systems, again, the base service gear certainly there, and that would be reused in a project. But as far as distribution throughout the building, that would be updated. And then lighting, kind of the same situation, and communication systems and security would definitely need to be updated. And we included some photos going through the MEP systems in the building. Evaluation for use as a police department facility. So last year when we were contacted to assemble this, one of the specific items that we were tasked with was looking at that building, the current footprint of it, and how do we convert that into a potential use for a police department facility. So we came up with 3 concept options in floor plan and put budgetary numbers to each of those options. We had much conversation with the police department about that. It revolves around operations. How do they use the facility? How do things best work out? When we do this early on, we do a programming conversation where we basically make a list of items that they need in the facility. And then we work what's called a bubble diagram, and we basically identify each of those functions, and we move them around on the floor plan and work out space needs, adjacencies, what department needs to work next to what department, does a staff member need to support another staff member, and kind of work through those things. With an existing building, obviously, we're trying to use as much of that building as we can to keep it as cost effective as possible. So we're trying to rework things with the least amount of renovation necessary. But knowing that the building is not of adequate square footage, we also have to look at building addition or additions onto that building to get to the total area that would be necessary based off of that roughly 37,500 square foot target that we were talking about. So each of these options is a different version of that. I'm going to roll through those here. The floor plans may not show up. Not sure how to get those on screen. There we go. My apology here. I'm going to have to shift things around a little bit. Oops. So I think what I'm going to do, given the timing here, the summary of the 3 different options, well, if anyone wants to, we can certainly look at individual floor plans, and I can do my best to try to get those images up on screen. There's 3 different options that we identified as potential for discussion of how that building could be remodeled, how it could be added on to be converted to the police department function. I would say none of those 3 options are fully flushed out as far as would one of those, should it be decided that one of those be chosen as the option, the floor plan for the use for a police department facility. That was not the purpose of putting those together. The purpose was to find out, could we come up with enough square footage, and could we put those in a bubble diagram, put those functions together in a format that I would say would get us maybe 80%, 90% of the way there, that we felt confident this is a viable option that we could explore if this project were to move forward. So while we have 3 options here of different layouts, none of the 3 are to a point that you would want to choose option A, option B, option C. Each of them would require more discussion. If a project were to move forward, I would say the project would end up looking like a version of one of those options more than likely, but it would have adjustments made to it. It would have things shifted a little bit. So to that point, I don't want to focus on individual floor plans and what the detail of each of those is, but the next sheet where I'm going to go here, if I can get back on screen, I apologize, the pages are off screen here, and I don't know where they're at. There we go. Okay, so we're looking at option 2 here, and again, I'm gonna move forward, but finding this one, you can see basically we put the different departments in different colors to help identify in our conversations how the layouts were happening. So here's what I was getting at. Each of these then, we developed a budget spreadsheet, and you can look through this information, but it indicates existing building square footage, total square footage, or excuse me, addition square footage and total square footage. And then we put square foot values to different items that would create that project. So we did that for the 3 options. And then I'm gonna move through, this is option 3 then. And when we got through with those three, what we did with option 4, which doesn't have a floor plan worked out, but option 4 is a comparison of budget for brand new construction. So we looked at, for the same comparable square footage, what would it cost to build that project new if you didn't use the Wildwood Plaza building for a renovation project for the PD? So that's what option 4 is. This spreadsheet, I think, is kind of the telltale. It's the summary of all of that information. So again, between the programming layouts for option 1, 2, and 3, we were in a variance of between 37,000 square feet and 42,000 square feet in how that laid out with additional building space. Option 4, we were at 35,700. The reason that's less is because if we were to design a brand new building, we can design it more efficiently. So you would probably be able to design the same programming and less square footage if that route were to take place. Again, going back to option 1, 2, and 3, if you look at the total budget value for those, they're ranging from 14.1 million to 13.5 million in the different versions. New construction in option 4, we targeted, again, the least amount of square footage. We targeted that at 15.7 million for a total construction cost. Based off the square footage of each of those options, you can see the square foot cost of budget of each of those projects on the bottom row. So that ranged from $311 a square foot to $364 a square foot, with option 4, new construction, coming in at $440 a square foot. The summary of what that means is that, yes, we came to the assessment that that building, the Wildwood Plaza building, can be converted for a police department use. It's going to take a renovation of the majority of the building area. It's going to take one or more building additions. With those additions, in some instances, in some of these scenarios, we would need a variance from the city for setback requirements, and that's indicated on the drawings as well, depending on what side of the building we would add on to. But yes, the building will work for that purpose. We can get enough square footage there, we can get enough parking there, that will work. The other part of it, I think, is that I mentioned the value of that building being the shell, the masonry walls and the steel structure, and also the property. Obviously, the land value comes into play there. But you'll see in the summary that's coming up here, we're getting there, is that you know, we're going from call it $13 million project to a project that is for new construction pushing, it's at 15.7 identified here. There's multiple millions of dollars, $2.5 to $3 million probably, of cost savings by using that building and renovating it versus new construction. That value is in that building shell. It's in the exterior walls and the steel structure, the foundations. All of that is in place, and other than some maintenance on the masonry walls, you don't have to do anything with it. So that's where you're saving and gaining the value of that existing building. That leads into our summary. Get that back centered on screen, which is kind of you know, what I just touched on. But in those budgets, we also we try to be all inclusive in our budgeting. If the city were to decide to talk about this project and funding it, you want to do that one time. You don't want to come back and have another meeting and say, the project is over on budget, we need to talk about more funding for it. We would rather be heavy on the front side and make sure that there's enough funding there. So we included close to $1 million in each option for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And then each option also has close to a $1 million contingency included with it as well. Both of those, I would never recommend doing a project without a contingency. That is the safety valve that you want to have there. It is an existing building renovation, so things that you don't see can come up during the course of a project. This one being pretty well wide open. I think we've had a good opportunity to see what's there and have a very valid understanding of that building, but I still would have contingency in a budget. If things went very well, if the PD didn't need, you know, as much furniture or equipment or shelving, those types of things. Some potential costs could be saved in that furniture budget as well, and that definitely would reduce the total project cost, excuse me, if those dollars didn't need to be spent. So again, I think in summary right now, what the city and what the council is being asked is not approval of a floor plan layout or anything specific regarding this, but does it make sense to use that building for the PD use? One other thing I want to mention is that regardless of what you talk about, discuss, what your decision is, with the city owning that building now, I do think it's important that something happen with it. And the reason I say that is simply because a building sitting empty is adding age to that building prematurely, without any doubt. No different than if any of us parks a vehicle in a garage and doesn't drive it for an extended period of time, you know, things wear prematurely simply because they're not being used. And so that in itself, I think whatever the decision is, I would suggest to see that building putting back into some form of function at some point in the near future. Definitely winter seasons are harsher on a building unoccupied. Although again, with as much rain as we've had this year, maybe there's a debate on that about summer conditions as well. But it's just an item I wanted to touch base on as far as your consideration. So with that, I think I'm going to ask if there's any questions, conversation that you'd like to engage in, and I'd be happy to try to assist further.
Thank you, Michael, for the presentation. And
Yes.
first up is Alderman Stalbert.
Thank you, Mayor. I did sit in on the original presentation. I'm glad to see it a second time because there are questions that came up that I maybe didn't catch earlier when we were at the community center, I think it was. I might have missed it in the presentation. What is the age of the Wildwood Plaza?
96. So it was built in 1996, so we're now 28 years old, 27 to 28.
Okay, thank you. And you covered this, but new versus renovation, we're looking at, depending upon which budget option we go with, anywhere from 1.6 million to 2.5 million if we were to go with a new construction. Again, just on the budget numbers. The one, I've got a few questions, but the fees, the professional fees and specialties, they were the same regardless of renovation or new. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so designing a new building on a bare site is, I'll call it easier. It's an easier task. We don't have to go out and field measure the existing building. We don't have to determine all of the parameters that we're going to maintain and work into a renovation project of an existing building. So while we targeted new building design in option number 4 as less square footage, we feel like we can design that in the same time frame as it would take to design a larger renovation project, because options 1 through 3 had more square footage in them. It's a simple, I guess I'll say, comparison of how efficiently we can work on a new project design.
Right, so the numbers don't seem to support it. What I'm looking at, the row titled professional fees, new at 934,800, specialties at 2.4 million. And those are the highest two compared to the 3 other renovation options. And I would agree with you. I would think that a new construction would be easier, but the fees listed don't seem to support that.
So are you looking at the option 4 spreadsheet?
I'm looking at the summary, budget summary.
Okay.
And toward the bottom, there are 2 rows highlighted in blue.
Oh, so they're a percentage basis in this report.
Okay.
Yep, it's based off of a percentage.
Of the total 15.7 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we, if the city decides to move forward and if we're engaged in a project, if it was a new design, we would look at, is that 37,000 square feet? Is it 35,000 square feet? Is it 40,000 square feet? In this option 4 summary, it was based off of a percentage.
Okay.
So,
And then if you look at the bottom line, people want to look at the bottom line, the cost
Yes.
per square foot on the new is 440 versus, 311, 340, 364.
yep.
And I think the higher cost per square foot, again, is based on a smaller footprint of the new because it's a more efficiently designed building, correct?
Yes, but also the fact that with new construction, you're paying to install concrete for foundations, floor slab,
Okay.
the exterior walls, the steel framing, and that cost is already at the Wildwood Plaza building. It's not part of a renovation project.
Okay.
I would think that's actually the larger portion of that square foot cost difference, with it being higher for new construction, is that you're not gaining the value of those existing items.
So one more question. I'll just kind of give you my initial read on this,
Yep.
but jump the gun. Your focus has been on the building and functionality of the building. One of the concerns I raised is the location of the existing building, and I'll use Wyowega train derailment as an example. They needed to vacate a 3-mile radius from that incident. Did you get into that at all? Actual site, and would the Wildwood Station still be within that, 3-mile radius? I think it would be, but.
Yeah, the task that we were brought on board for last year didn't talk about reviewing the site location within the city. However, the 2017 study did.
Okay.
And interestingly, that location of the Wildwood Plaza within the city was identified as one of the site locations that Five Bugles did recommend.
Yeah, I did.
So I think that there was 2, if I remember correctly, they looked at 7 or 8 different site locations within the city, 2 that they recommended, and this was in the proximity of one of those.
Yeah. Okay, that's all helpful. Good to know that, because I think you mentioned that at the community center, and it just came back to me now I heard
Sure.
it again. So in summary, we've outgrown the existing facility. We've outlived the security measures since 40 years ago. We all know that's different. We could make the Wildwood Station work. The shell alone of that building is where the value is.
Yes.
And I'm looking at the numbers, and again, don't mean to be jumping to conclusions, but the numbers 1.6 million to 2.5 million variant between renovation and new just tells me that we maybe should be considering new.
It's a topic for discussion.
I don't know if
dispute.
raising that building is even worth the lift, you know what I mean? It would avoid having to buy land or acquire land. But I think it's an option that maybe we should consider. So thanks again for the presentation.
Absolutely.
It's helpful. Appreciate it.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. I guess in option 4, would that include site? If it would be a new site, or is this primarily focused on just the structure itself?
I do not believe, well, let me go back to the option 4. And let's see. We, property acquisition, so we had legal fees included. I'm looking to see if we included bare land cost in the option 4 budget. My apology, from going back to last year assembling this, I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay, yes, thank you. So the way that we viewed that was that, assuming the city did take ownership of the Wildwood Plaza site, that building would be demoed and that would be the site for new construction. So there was a $200,000 line item included in option 4 for demo. But if the city wanted to purchase a new parcel of land for a new police department facility, that cost was not included in option 4.
But that 200,000 could be applied to a different
Exactly,
property?
yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And then the city would have the option to do whatever else with the Wildwood Plaza, correct?
Alderman Weigel?
Thank you. And Mr. Riley stole one of my questions. You only get one now. And just to confirm, I think I know the answer, but I want to ask a professional here. So when we were talking earlier about there being about a 40-year lifespan for these buildings here, obviously the current building has reached that lifespan. With remodeling or updating, take your pick a word, would we get another 40 years out of it, or are we on a shorter lifespan if we were to take the current building and modify it as needed?
It would depend on the extent of renovation of that building. So you're talking about the current police department facility, renovating that?
No. Renovating the Wildwood Plaza?
Okay, sorry, I
No,
misunderstood
you're
the
fine.
question
Yeah,
then.
bad question. So if we were to renovate the Wildwood Plaza,
Okay.
we're looking at like options 1 through 3.
Yes.
Would we still get another 40 years out of that, or would it
Yes.
be? Okay, we would.
Yes,
Perfect. Thank you.
exactly. So certainly with new construction, you're gaining value of all new materials. But when I'm talking about the building concrete, the foundations, the floor slab, the masonry walls, and the steel frame structure, again, the only item there that really needs maintenance is the masonry walls. They're painted on that building. That would need to be maintained. Tuck pointing needs to be maintained to make sure that it stays waterproof and that there's not water infiltration through the walls. As long as that's maintained, absolutely, I would confidently state 40 years out of the renovated project for that building.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. So when we've been talking about this in our CIP, we have been kind of throwing around the figure of $10 million. So thinking on your feet, if you saw us only having $10 million, how would you change this project?
I wouldn't phrase it as only 10 million. That's a big number.
Absolutely.
It is. Right. So again, for options 1 through 3, the budget numbers that we assembled include contingency and FF&E, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment around $2 million. As I stated, I wouldn't go into a project without contingency, but that $2 million of subtracted off of those budgets is getting closer to that. I think at that point, if $10 million were able to be approved for the project, that then is how we design the project with that in mind. We do more checkpoints along the way to make sure that we're maintaining within the approved dollar amount for that project. So it's almost reverse engineering, if you will. We can design a project with a client and ask, tell us everything that you want in this project. We can put it on paper and we can find out what the number is, or we can have a set number up front and then we design towards that number. So 2 ways to look at pulling a project together as far as the design is concerned. The positive, I think, in discussion of a $10 million budget for a project is that it's substantial. If a number was put out there of $6 or $7 million, it wouldn't be the same building, it wouldn't be the same project. At that point, there's such a discrepancy or disparity between the 2 ranges of numbers that something would have to be removed from that project, something substantial, building square footage, a component of a project. You couldn't simply right size it to a budget of that range being cut back that far.
So in your past experience with various projects, would you say that you're confident $10 million would get this building done? It would create a police station that is safe and functional and has the space?
Yes, I feel like that. Again, I don't view that as a small dollar amount. I feel like that can support a project that the city would benefit from, that the police department would benefit from for decades to come. We would put that on paper and, as you work through a design, there's 3 different phases: schematic design, design development, final design. Each of those 3 phases in design, we use as a checkpoint to update a budget as well and make sure that we're on track. So even firming up one of the options or whatever option it would be as far as a floor plan is concerned and pulling together a project scope, at the end of that initial concept phase, schematic design, we would pull together a budget at that point, and we would have a very good feeling to confirm, is $10 million going to support a project that didn't lose anything major? I think that would probably be kind of the question to ask. Some things might have to be sized down some, but I don't feel trimming fingernails versus, having to, yeah. cut off a leg or a foot. It's all, I mentioned $6 or $7 million. At that point, you're talking about a severe cut of something. With the checkpoints along the way, I think that, yes, we can confirm that it's a project that would be of value to the city.
Alderman Fire? He's yellow. Any other questions from the council? Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that appealed to me about this building and about where I put my vote on it was it's free, essentially, to us, except we're losing property taxes, but essentially we're getting a free building. Is there a possibility of doing a project on that building to spend, let's say, $250,000 on stopping the roof from the roof shingles from shrinking and stopping any possibility of water getting into the foundation? What it needs to survive as a building, and then putting it on the market and perhaps trying to sell it for $500,000 or more. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, definitely.
So you feel confident maybe you know what would have to be done to make it marketable in that regard?
It would depend on how and who you want to market the building to, I think, because you may get a developer that would want simply that building in its current condition as inexpensively as they could purchase it, in which case the city wouldn't probably benefit from sticking or investing any money into it to update it. If someone didn't want to get into a remodel project when they bought the building, yes, maintaining exterior walls, putting a new roof on it, I think that's an absolute must for whatever's going to happen with that building. But the question there kind of becomes, how far do you take that? Because people have different perceptions. When they see that building, they're going to view it differently. Everybody would have their own opinion of it, I think. So some people might look at that parking lot, for instance, and say it's completely cracked. Water can get down in those cracks. It's going to continue to fail. The whole parking lot should be torn out and replaced. That obviously is a major expense if you're looking at putting it on the market and trying to sell the building. So I don't know for certain how you would find the happy medium of what would you fix and how much money would the city invest into it before you'd put it on the market. But absolutely, it's a viable option, yes.
I base these questions on the fact that the real value is in the building itself, not, as you've said several times during your presentation. And I think that's, I remember not too long ago in here, a few months ago perhaps, or maybe even a year ago, the people telling us that, oh, we've got to put Marshfield on the map because we get calls every day. I'm sure of that. Every day do we have any beautiful marketable buildings for sale in Marshfield? And we've got to say no, so let's buy us a building. So that's why I'm skeptical of the value of the building as a police station, and I'm considering it much more value to the city as an asset that we can deal with, that we can sell or market.
I don't know the situation with the prior owner of the building. I never met that person, didn't have a conversation with them, but I don't know if that might be a question that could be asked of the prior owner. What would their take be on it? Why did they, take the path that they did versus marketing it and selling it as real estate? I just don't know the situation, but it might shed light on possibly that path or that avenue if the city were to consider that, at least in that person's eyes, what that meant. So.
Alderman Spiros?
I don't remember when this original presentation was done, but do you think the same cost apply now, or has there been an increase in construction costs since this was done?
That's a question I thought might come up. And we spoke about this internally in our office within the last week. Overall, I would say there hasn't been a lot of variance in construction costs that we've seen within the last year. So when we pulled this together, it was fall of '23. And of course now, believe it or not, we're getting close to fall of '24. So nearly a year has passed. I would say, again, based off our internal discussions, we feel like it's certainly within 2 or 3%, possibly one way or the other. Wood construction, wood materials have decreased, but there's hardly any wood construction in this building. It's all non-combustible, steel, masonry, concrete. Those items have kind of held steady as far as material cost is concerned. We do hear an awful lot from contractors that they are having difficulty finding labor, skilled labor, quality labor, and they're having to pay more for that. So to that point, there could be a slight bump in labor cost because of that. The other side of that, though, is that we're definitely now hearing from multiple general contractors. We're getting phone calls very frequently, weekly, of contractors asking, do you have anything that we can bid? So I think the construction is slowing down, and that has contractors getting more competitive in their pricing. This project, I think, given the size of it, the scale of it, what it is, it would draw good attention. So we think more or less there's going to be some increase, some decrease, but it's going to be about the same numbers as we have in here. Yes.
Alderman Fire?
Having been involved with the county when we talked about building a new jail, which started 10 years ago, and if we just when I got on the county board, if we just started about 5 years after I got on, we'd have been in pretty good shape. When we originally decided to build what we're building now, it was 58 million, and then we waited just about long enough to realize when it's time to turn the key. You know what it went up to? 100 million. So the longer you delay it, the more it's going to cost you. So if you're going to do something, do it now, because we thought maybe we'd be all right at 58 million, but it didn't work that way. So just what I know about how we build a building, you better do it now if you're going to build a concrete building. It's time to do something. And we have the shell there. That's the secret. And we don't know what a piece of property is going to cost to put a building like that on. And as soon as the public realizes we're looking, price is going to go up. Everybody knows land doesn't come cheap.
I'll echo that in that I've been a licensed architect since 2008. I've designed close to 100 projects now over the course of those years. And I've had clients that have shelved projects for a period of time for whatever reasons. I have never had a client come back and say, I'm glad I did that. Not once. I've had clients come back and say that was not a good decision because the price went up. It seems like even if the economy is for the better, interest rates go down, whatever the case might be, for whatever reason, cost of living from year to year, construction costs go up every year. And I never quite put two and two together as to why there's never a real checks and balance to that. But yes, I agree that postponing inevitably leads to a higher number the next time around. The other thing about that is if you put a project out for bid and decide not to build it because of cost, you can pretty much be guaranteed the next time around it's going to be even higher because it's kind of like showing your cards beforehand. People know what happened the last time around, and that factors into numbers that come in. So I agree. Postponing usually leads to a higher cost at some point in the future.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, I have some, but I think you can see me.
We don't see you, but that's quite all right, Derek.
Excellent. Sorry, I had my hand raised for a while. I meant to jump in last time.
Yeah, we didn't see you.
I
apologize.
Not your fault at all. I realized that after a minute I could see the screen only. Couple questions I had. One, I wanted to ask, have there been alternative considerations put in for this? I know we're kind of coming in with a very high level number, so we're not really doing a lot of deep diving on finishes, carpets, et cetera. But is there anything of the existing building that you think would be able to be repurposed or reused, like possibly doing like polished concrete or something to kind of bring some of those costs down?
Yeah, and you're correct, we haven't looked at the budget semblance in that level of detail at this point. This is simply a square foot number. Getting into an actual project design, we would certainly have those conversations. And, Value engineering is a term that's used in our industry. We try to find value in how we design something because there's multiple ways to design pretty much everything in a building. That I think ties to also the discussion of if a certain dollar amount is approved for a project, designing to that dollar amount. You can talk about, does polished concrete, saving there allow you to maintain something else that you want to have or vice versa. There's trade-offs throughout the entire design, and that's something that we work through with the city as we design the building, making sure that we're staying in check.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm just thinking if there's alternatives that we can put in at some point to help bring the cost down, that may help us. This may not be a question for you, it might be more for Jody, but one of the things I asked for at the last meeting was the potential for phased plans and seeing what was important to the police department to get done right away, so that we could possibly look at how we phase that in and maybe we can do this in chunks. And then I just want to throw out a note. I know in the past you presented a couple of example projects that you guys have worked on or for police buildings, but do we have any kind of, I guess, historical data on projects that have been done that maybe are similar communities to ours and what they were spending? Obviously, knowing construction costs can vary over time, but I'm just curious, are we really footing a bill here, like saying we're going to build out this huge building and somebody else did it for like 5? I just want to see kind of what we're doing compared to other locations.
Yeah, Derek, I'll jump in. Since we talked last, it's been a few weeks now probably, but with phasing in, I think, when we look at actually the workings of the police department, our patrol detective records, those have to stay kind of together. We all kind of work together in unity. When I think about phasing in, I think about maybe storage things or stuff like that, where maybe we can use our current buildings for a while until we build other storage. But the workings of the department, I think, have to move in unison. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think what I'm thinking, like in my head, is obviously the area isn't great, like the way it's set up. There's concrete work that needs to be done, but I'm like, is there potential that you could park your fleet over there, kind of unsecured, until you could get the secured ramp built out? Like that's a big chunk of the project that maybe could be done at a later date. Just little things like that. I know we talked last time about the shooting range and whether or not we would need that right away. Just little things. I really do think that this would be a huge benefit to the police department. Like I said, I toured that building. It's one of the first things I did when I joined council, and you guys are in definite need for a change. And I do think this building getting handed to us on a silver platter was kind of the perfect setup for it. It's just how do we get there and do it right so that we're not upsetting a bunch of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we could look into those options. As long as it doesn't interrupt the service that we're providing, we could, explore those areas.
Cool. Thank you.
I'll mention to one other part of your questions as well. In 2019, 2020, we designed a new police department facility for Lake Delton. That was 30,000 square feet, so smaller than this. That project at that time came in just under 14 million all in. So for comparison's sake, and again, that was new construction. That's a little different, but we could get comparable data for you. There's, as I said, there's always different ways to approach designing a project. So whether the carpet costs $27 a yard or $36 a yard, that all factors into it. And if we know where we need to head with the budget, we can design to that.
Yeah, and I'd be interested, just because you mentioned Lake Delton, obviously there's probably a size difference there. So I'm curious to know like what their force looks like versus what our force looks like, and knowing that that was about 5 years ago and costs have significantly changed. So just to see kind of what that ratio is to make sure we're not going crazy.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, request from Councilmember Spiros, possible referendum to secure funds for the project. Alderman Spiros?
No.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just brought this up because I thought it was worth discussing and seeing the opinions of other people here. It's a lot of money to spend, and I'm not sure, the taxpayers, that's how they would want it spent. So I think it's just worth a discussion. I don't have an opinion one way or another yet on it. That's why I wanted to sort of hear, what everybody's thoughts were on it. And I know we're up against a time crunch for that. I think we have like till the end of August to like formulate the question. HAP's probably okay with doing that for us before the deadline, if that's the way we wanted to go. So I kind of would just like to hear from other people on what their thoughts are on that.
Comment on that?
Yep, Jess is going to start us off.
I just want to follow up on your end of August. So yes, if you wanted something on the November ballot for referendum, that does have to be to the county clerk by 8 a.m. on August 28th, ballots get printed. So you would need to adopt that resolution before that point. However, there was a change in the referendum laws with Act 12. So for an advisory referendum, a municipality can no longer do advisory. You have to be putting forth a referendum with specific dollar amounts with specific purpose. So I believe this would be a question for HAP and for Department of Revenue. I believe you need to have all of your engineering work, all of your plans finished, finalized, with your total dollar amount ready to come forward before you could go to referendum. So I don't think if that's really the case, you would be ready for November. You would be looking at maybe April, if that could be done. After that, we don't have any other elections next year.
I'll just add that in preparation for this conversation tonight, I did talk to the school superintendent and asked if they had any plans yet in terms of a possible referendum following up on the one that did not pass in April 2023. He said no decision had been made, and this goes back, like I said, a week to 10 days ago. No decision had been made, but they were looking at possibly having one yet this November. So, there could be a conflict there if we went for that date anyway. Not sure, though.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Fire.
I guess my comment on this is, of my 24 years in city government, our chances of referendums passing have been slim to none. We have not done well in 24 years. Any referendum we had is, when you ask the citizens to spend $10 million, they're going to say, why would we want to do that? They don't want to look at the figures. They aren't going to look at the facts. And they know for a fact, Wood County, they have 19 members on Wood County. They voted for a $100 million facility, and there's only 2 people that voted against that $100 million. And I don't see any kickback or feedback from any of the county people that are paying their taxes that they didn't want that jail. It's just something they knew we needed, the same as this. We need this. Without the jail, we would have been in trouble. And basically without this new station, different station, we're also going to be in trouble. So I think that we should just bite the bullet and make the decision on our own. We're elected to do this. As an alderman, it's part of our duties to make the big decisions, and this is a tough one, but I think it's the one we should make.
Alderman Wagner.
Thank you. I want to confirm what Mike is saying about that. There was the one thing that I feel happy about was that I was very suspicious of how much a new jail was going to cost when we did it, and I remember standing up and telling them, folks, this is like poker. If you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar. So you're authorizing plans and specifications be built. You talk about bids going out for it. Remember, once you're in this, you're not going to get out of it. And that passed 17-2, and then a few weeks later, we found out it wasn't 57 million anymore. It was 98 million. And the final cost is coming in somewhere around 100 million. So, I guess I would give the admonition to this body the same way we did with the county board. And that is, there's going to become a point where you're going to have to start to incur costs to find answers. But at that point in time, you better be prepared to make a decision and live with the consequences. And that's all I have to say about that.
Alderman Weigel.
Thank you. Just kind of thinking out loud and kind of giving Ms. Bureau some feedback that she requested here, but if I'm thinking about this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because that very well may be the case, but we're looking at if we decide to raise funds for this in police station, we're really looking at 2 options here. Either referendum, or we're looking at it through CIP. Is that correct?
Yeah, borrowing through the CIP program.
Right, and if we go through CIP, then that really, if I heard correctly at one of the last meetings, that's going to alter what our current plans are for CIP significantly over the next X amount of years? Or are we able just to fit that in and run with it? Okay.
Yeah, the plan you'll be voting on later tonight has that built in. But you're right, there's an opportunity cost, obviously, when we spend $10 million on this project of other things not happening. But the current plan before you will include that.
Right, okay, thank you.
Alderman O'Reilly, then Alderman Werman.
Thank you. I honestly think that the referendum is the right way to go. As much as we're here making decisions as representatives, something of this size and the shape that our budget's in, I think going to get their input on it as taxpayers is, at least for me, it's of the utmost importance. To say we haven't had luck on them, I don't think it's luck. I think it's what the people that are paying the bill are telling you what to do with the money. And I think that's the way it should be in government. I guess I would support the referendum, and I'll just leave it at that.
Alderman Werman?
Yeah, before we get too far in the process, are we losing sight of whatever tools and options we have to reach out to citizens and find out? I mean, can we call on communications to get a survey done up and try to see what kind of results we get from that? Or is there like some sort of like public knowledge or, informational sessions we can put out there that we could try to draw some attention and see what people think?
I think we could definitely do something like that. And again, that would be premised on the idea that you wouldn't be bringing a referendum to November, because as the city clerk said, you'd have to get the ballot question turned in about a month from today. So that would be a longer term vision, maybe looking at April of 2025. But that would certainly be possible to get their input in terms of what they think of the project.
Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, the next, Alderman Spiros.
Oh, sorry, I just jumped in there at the last minute.
No, that's all right.
It doesn't, well, I mean, I don't think that, that we really came to any conclusion. And I think that I would like to add a further discussion where we have a little bit more time to next week or the next council's agenda.
That sounds good.
I think this sounds great.
I think we would want to debrief from this meeting anyway, from what we learned.
Alderman Fire?
Okay, if we're going to wait for a question for our next meeting, then we have to also have an answer. If we put this off a referendum about the police department, if it fails, does everything you want to do? What about your remodel? Your remodel, if you're going to remodel the present station or build a new one, it's still going to be there. If they turn this referendum down, where does that put us in the spectrum of what we're going to do? Where are we at now? We've already opened Pandora's box. You aren't going to close it. If they don't want you to spend money on the police department, you're not going to get it, because then you're going to have to keep going back for a referendum to get it approved. You may be opening Pandora's box. That's where I say we as elected 10 people should make this decision on our own. We got to put our big boy pants on and decide what we're going to do. It's as simple as that. It's a lot of money, but you got to look at it. It's for 20, what's the loan out for 20 years, whatever it is. It's not that much tax with what you're getting. And when you're talking about public safety, it is the most important piece of equipment we have that we finance in this state is public safety. And they should be in a proper place to run their proper business.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, Mike, I think you make some really good points. I agree with you on a lot of those. That's why I suggested that we discuss it more in depth, because we haven't even made a decision amongst the 10 of us if we want a brand new building, if we like option A, if we like option B, if we like option C. We haven't even made that decision. So I think that we just have to have a lot deeper conversation, and it has to start with like, what option are we seriously looking at? And then we have to go from there, what's that cost of that option and move forward, because I just don't think that we are settled on anything at this point. And so I think that talking about referendum is just part of the broad discussion of all of it.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. So I just want to know where we're moving from here. When do we need to make a decision? We're voting on the CIP, which is sort of saying we're putting this space in to borrow for it. When do you want us to make a decision? What's your hope for moving this project forward? You know, like we could spin our wheels on this for 2 years. What are you hoping for?
Well, I guess it's my job just to point out the needs of our department. You guys have the difficult task to decide where we spend the money on property. I feel that we've expressed that we have a need for the department, and with every year that becomes more and more, of a problem. So I guess I don't have a great answer for you, but I guess you guys have to decide, which direction you want to go.
But if you had sort of a time frame, what would be the ideal time frame for breaking ground or renovating or whatever?
As soon as possible.
Go ahead, Steve.
To go back to your earlier question too, a couple questions that have been thrown out there involving the CIP. Again, the CIP is a blueprint for future spending. So what you're doing if you adopt the CIP tonight with the $10 million over 2 years in it for this project, you're putting a marker down saying that you're very interested in this project. You're not deciding to do it, but you're showing that you've planned potentially on how to borrow for it and how you would fit into the next 5 years of spending. Having said that, this is an important discussion tonight. I'm so glad that we had Michael here. Thanks for being here, making the presentation, because we've owned the building now for 7 months. And as you said, vacant, unoccupied buildings don't get better. They deteriorate. So this is kind of like jump-starting the process, I hope, for real. And I'm very glad to hear what you said, Councilmember Spiros, about putting this on the next agenda, to debrief from this and really start pushing the process forward toward a decision. I don't see us, if the referendum is what you decide to do, I don't see that happening in November of 2024 because of the timeline indicated. If you choose to do it later, fine. If you choose to borrow it, fine. But this needs to be a regular part of our business until we make a decision what way we want to go. And I think tonight kind of jump-started that process again.
Alderman Spiros?
Yeah, and Steve, just in thinking this out, I'm actually thinking that rather than adding it to an agenda, we may just need a special meeting because we can see already we've gone 20 minutes past discussing just this. I think it's almost warranted its own meeting because I think it will go long. And I think it'll be a long discussion and then cramming it with everything else. I don't want people to feel rushed or things like that either, so.
I'm seeing heads nod. Maybe we can float dates for a possible special night entirely separate from regular meetings. I think it's a very good idea, actually.
And I just have one question for Jody. If the unfortunate incident comes to fruition that we do not use that building, this means you have to pour more money into the building that is not even adequate. Well, and more money, right? And
right.
More money,
it's a 42-year-old building.
Yeah, but I'm not even saying the age, but the things that, as Michael said, that you need in this building. And like Mike said, the safety. I mean, I'm okay walking in there, but someone else might not be because there is not that bulletproof glass there.
But there is.
There is, but it's not up to,
that.
Whatever. Yes, sir. Yep. So
we got that now. So,
yep, we need to think about that.
But because, to answer your question, we will need to invest in the building to keep it up, and it won't address the needs that were addressed in Mike's presentation.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so Steve, if you want to find us a time.
Yeah, I'll float some dates and times with you, and hopefully we'll be able to land on one. Okay. Thank you very much.
And who would like to adjourn the meeting? Alderman Weigel and Alderman O'Reilly, please vote to adjourn.
Mr. Mormon?
Yes.
We are adjourned. We'll start the next meeting in 5.
Was their location in Tomahawk.